BBC News is 3 minutes past 1, more at 2.
Jimmy Young, BBC Radio 2.
That's Marvin Gaye and Kim Weston, and It Takes Two. Now, September last year saw the protest against fuel taxes, which almost brought the country to a standstill. And the day after the Prime Minister admitted that Britain faced a national crisis, I interviewed the Leader of the Opposition, Right Honourable William Hague. Now, he's been quoted as saying that the protesters had made a powerful point about the level of taxation on fuel. So I asked him whether he was prepared to say that if he won the next election, he would guarantee to reduce the level of tax on fuel.
We will reduce taxes. There is no doubt about that. We will reduce taxes, and we think fuel duty is a very strong candidate for that. But remember, we are an alternative government. We are going to be a future government. So we have to show how all the sums would add up. We have to make sure that we have a coherent programme for reducing taxes and how we would save the money necessary to reduce taxes. And we want to present that in detail and show how it all adds up together.
You're saying, or you just did say, taxes on fuel would be a strong candidate to be reduced. That is very different from saying we'll reduce them.
It is different from that, but you can see where we're coming from. We have opposed all the recent increases in fuel tax. Since I've been leader of the party, we have opposed all the fuel duty increases under the Labour Party, so it would never have got to this level if there had been a Conservative government. That is different from being able to reduce them in the future because, of course, the government started spending a lot of the money. But we want to cut taxes. We'll show how we're going to do it so that people can judge us on that before we come to election day.
Well, now, just picking up on something before we move on to the next point. If you won't guarantee to cut the tax on fuel, I mean, how can you possibly criticise the government?
Because we wouldn't have put it up, because they've put it up despite every warning. And they always try to blame somebody else for it, have you noticed? First they tried to blame us, even though we were the opposition. Then they tried to blame OPEC. Then they tried to blame the oil companies. But they've put 16 pence a litre in tax on every litre of fuel. And no government's ever put that amount on a litre of fuel before. And they did it. We voted against it.
OK. You say we wouldn't have put it up in the first place. In your last manifesto, you said you would put up the tax on fuel by 5% plus inflation every year. So you've now dropped that policy, have you?
Yes, we have. The whole point of an escalator is when you get to the top, you're meant to get off. And we have got to the top on the fuel duties. So 2 points on that. First of all, they speeded that up tremendously. The Labour government took over and speeded up the increase in fuel duties.
Well, you said 5%, they said 6%.
Yeah, but they also had an extra budget, and so they got in an extra 6% on everybody. See, and they don't like to tell you that. So they speeded it up dramatically. Secondly, we have had these policies in the past, but we're now talking about the future. And since I've been leader of the party, we have opposed all the fuel duty increases.
But why did you do the U-turn? When you said you'd put up tax on fuel by 5% plus inflation and then you dropped it, why did you drop it?
Because at the time, in the past, when we were saying that, fuel in this country was less expensive than on the continent. Well, now it's much more expensive. You see, the government say we introduced the escalator on fuel. They got off the escalator, which we did. They got off the escalator and got into a lift. They took it up far faster than any previous government. And, of course, you can't go on increasing it when it's much more expensive than the rest of Europe.
Could it just be, because you're an astute politician, could it just be that you're afraid to say you'll cut fuel tax because Labour will claim and your other opponents will claim that you can only do that if you cut funding for essential services like the National Health Service? Some people say you're going to cut it by £15 billion anyway.
Well, they would say that, and it is one of the things. No, of course not. One of the things I want to show is how you can reduce taxes and where we should reduce them and how we can afford to do that. Now, I want to show that in a clear and consistent way, and that means we do it when we've done all the sums, and we do it in a consistent way and well-organised way. I don't think that appeasing people by announcing one tax change in 1 week is the root of this problem. But I think we've got to become a country that tries to reduce tax, not increase them.
But with respect, I mean, all you seem to be saying is, yes, we'll reduce taxes and so on, but you won't tell us how you're going to do it. You're going to say, we'll tell you about that later.
Well, we will tell you about that later, and before we have an election. Now, that means that tax is going to be an important issue at the next election, because you'll have a Conservative party with a clear plan to reduce taxes, and how we're going to pay for it. And you have a Labour Party that is going to go on increasing people's taxes. Now, I think that is going to make tax a very important issue at the next election.
I'm sure it will.
And until this week, the thing that has changed this week is they thought it didn't matter before. They thought they could load taxes onto people and nobody would bother.
Well, you could turn that, what you just said, on its head, of course, because your government has got a pretty appalling record on tax, actually. I mean, you raise taxes, you put VAT on household fuel at 17.5%. You introduced the fuel escalator, and it took Gordon Brown to stop it.
Well, we're talking about the future. I'm planning a future.
Oh, I see. So you're apologising for the past.
My responsibility is for the future, not the past. And we have never had tax increases on the scale we've had in the last few years under previous governments.
Well, with respect, what you seem to accept then is you accept that you have had an appalling record on tax in the past.
No, I didn't accept that. There were some tax reductions under previous Conservative governments, and sometimes there were tax increases when there was a recession, if you remember, in the early 1990s or in the beginning of the Thatcher government in the early 80s. A lot of taxes were brought down. Remember, tax rates went up to 98% on some income until we had a Conservative government. So Conservatives overall have a good record on tax.
You'll remember that barely a year ago, you were in here and you gave our listeners a tax guarantee you weren't going to raise taxes. Since when Michael Portillo's gone back on that, he's done a U-turn on that. I mean, isn't it true that, when it comes to tax, the public, they stop believing politicians' promises, probably including yours.
I think they do. Of course, people are sceptical about politicians' promises, and that is exactly why our approach is what I was describing earlier, that we will show people how all the sums add up, where we would get the money and so on, and we'll show them that before election day. Now, you're going to get a programme to reduce taxes. From us, you have the certainty of higher taxes under Labour. Which one do you think people are going to choose?
When are we going to see this programme of yours?
When it's ready. And
when's it going to be ready?
It'll be ready when I decide it's ready, and I'm satisfied that we've got all the sums right.
So in the meantime, you see, the thing is, William, in the meantime, you can waffle on here. And I know our telephones will go potty in a minute. They'll say, why is that man wasting our time? He's just sitting there waffling on. Why should we believe him?
No, I'm not just waffling on. I've given many specific examples already. For instance, I've just told you some
really
of the areas.
Specific.
No, they are. I've just given you several specific areas where we'd reduce spending.
Yeah, but when I say, OK, when are you going to see the costing on these, you say, when I'm ready.
But when they're ready. But remember, there's no point producing a programme for government all costed out that then is obsolete when you get to the election. And
so you
we're not fighting the election
any plans at the moment because you're putting
plans at the moment
because you're afraid they'll be obsolete.
But people want to see at the election. Well, the events change. The economy changes. The inflation rate changes. So you have to produce what you would do in government at the time of the election or in the run-up to the election. And that is what we will do.
Well, now, when the fuel protest was, really at its height, we asked our listeners what they thought about it all. And the result, which doesn't necessarily represent public opinion as a whole, but nonetheless a staggering 157,489 people rang our phone vote, which made it, incidentally, the largest ever phone vote on radio in this country, and 91% of the listeners who rang in said yes, protester. So the man at the centre of the dispute was David Handley, and I asked him whether, if the Chancellor reduced the tax on fuel, he ought to raise income tax.
I think the people of this country, and this is only my personal opinion, would rather see a taxation system where they can see where the money is being spent, rather than stealth taxes. If a government then gets it wrong, then they've got to hold their hand up and explain to the voter why they have got it wrong. And if they need more money, they have to explain again to the voter why they need it, what's gone wrong.
You see, there are accusations made, you say, David, that your arguments are very simplistic. In other words, that fuel duty is certainly higher here than it is on the continent, but over there things like business taxes are much higher and they have to pay motorway tolls and so on. So in other words, here we are not actually doing too badly.
Well, I think if you talk to any man in the street that I was talking to, I know you've told me this morning your phone-in doesn't show that,
That's
but
right.
I have yet to meet a person who's told me that this fuel tax is not hitting their wages, their salaries, but above all, our industries. It is crucifying them. I mean, they cannot carry on like this. We have got hauliers, farmers, we have also got others. The fishing industry, it's hitting everyone.
So now, I just wonder, are you directing your energies in the right direction? I mean, this very day, we got Shell announcing record profits and seems to be very well at the high price of fuel. Shouldn't you be directing some arrows at them, perhaps?
Well, I mean, you know, I've seen the figures today, and I'll be quite honest with you. I think they're absolutely disgusting and deplorable in this situation. But at the end of the day, the people of this country vote a government in to govern the country for them.
Well, absolutely. And, of course, Tony Blair says, he says exactly that the government is elected and it has to take decisions, and there are sometimes difficult decisions, and that's what he's doing.
Yeah, I take that on board. But why is he not prepared to talk to grassroots people? If he talks to them, they are sensible people, and the job would be sorted out.
Okay, so now what is going to happen then? I mean, if they don't cave into your demands, you've got this convoy to London, 25,000 vehicles. You say you're going to stay in London as long as it takes. There's talk of refineries, possibly food outlets being blockaded. I mean, are you going to do all those things?
Right. Well, let's put the record straight here and now on your programme.
Right.
I condemn anyone that is talking of blocking a food distribution centre, anything to do with public transport, i.e. railways, and certainly, things like the national grid. There are people talking about, surging the national grid and putting power out. We totally, People's Fuel Lobby and David Hanley above all, totally condemn any action like that.
So what are we actually looking at then, David?
What we're doing is a peaceful protest, starting in the northeast. They will be driving at normal speeds, but they are calling at various cities explaining why we're doing what we're doing, to culminate in London on the 14th, when we would ask anybody that's got a concern over the tax issue, if Gordon Brown has not done anything, to come there peacefully, and then we will march to 10 down the street.
How long are you going to stay then?
Well, I mean, basically, what we would do, I would think at this precise moment in time, is want to show this government the number of people that feel very disturbed about the level of fuel tax.
Well, you certainly made your point today anyway, David. Thank you very much for taking time out to talk to me on the programme.
Thank you for allowing me to.
At Spyro Gyra and their morning dance, or their afternoon dance in this case, it being 21 minutes past 1. Now, legal question last year. I got a typically droll answer from our legal beagle, Bill Thomas. Tim Brown from Luton. He referred to a case where a family wanted to bury a dead relative in the back garden. A local resident complained to the police but was told it wasn't illegal. The council said it was perfectly in order, provided that certain criteria were met. So I asked Bill to explain what the criteria were.
Well, somebody's written a book about this, and I'm blowed if I can remember what it's called, but there is a book that no doubt somebody will remember and listen, and you'll probably get details on a website somewhere. The answer is yes, you can bury a body, whether it's a human body or an animal's body, in your garden, provided it is not near a watercourse, or provided it isn't interfering with drains, provided there is no covenant in your deeds, no statement in the deeds relating to your property which prohibit such a thing being done. So, yes, it's perfectly okay to do it. And there are times when I think that when I feel, as I often do when I get up in the morning, that I may not last the day, I might go out and dig a pit just to have it ready, and then lie gently down in it and get somebody to shovel the earth over me when they get home from work. And that would be perfectly okay. The serious point to remember, of course, is that once you've buried Uncle Reg in the garden, he's there. And when you come to sell, whereas it is probably quite an attractive thing having Uncle Reg up the top of the garden, it may well be less attractive to a potential purchaser who may not like the idea of a body being buried in the garden, or may, start digging his asparagus bed and find a skeleton and then go bananas and think that some frightful murder or something has been committed and he's come across a scene of crime. So you do have seriously to think about that. But subject to that, absolutely no problem at all.
Now then, on the 4th of August, the Queen Mother celebrated her 100th birthday, and the day's festivities, as you will remember, included a carriage procession from Clarence House along the Mall to Buckingham Palace. The royal correspondent for The Mirror, James Whittaker, was at the scene, and I asked him what the atmosphere was like.
Your timing is immaculate. The Queen Mother has just come through the gates at the front of Buckingham Palace. The 41-gun salute is going off next door in Green Park, and the atmosphere is wonderful.
How big's the crowd, James?
Oh, big. I think we're looking at 30 to 40,000 people here.
Yeah.
They are literally 20 or 25 deep, spreading into the park nearby, and there are a lot of people. They're all coming forward now, rather like just after the war. You remember those wonderful movie tone pictures? You remember when everybody crushed towards Buckingham Palace? Well, I tell you, that's happening now, and the area outside the palace is really beginning to fill up.
Now, apparently the timetable is that she'll appear on the balcony of Buckingham Palace at about 12:30. Is that right?
About 12:30, 25 to 1. She's just gone inside the palace now. She will then fuss around and do a little bit, and everybody will greet her in there. She will compose herself, and the plan is, Jimmy, that she comes out onto the balcony, 12:30, 25 to 1, that sort of thing. You can hear people cheering in the background. You can. And then after, the plan is, and it's not fixed in concrete, any of it, because she is 100, and they're going to judge and see how she is, having done that carriage drive, which may not be demanding for you, Jimmy, but it might be a little bit for her. They're going to say, how are you feeling, ma'am? Yeah. The idea is that she comes out on that balcony on her own, then pretty soon afterwards will be joined by the Queen and, of course, her other daughter, Princess Margaret. Following that, the plan is that other members of the royal family, and there are going to be about a total of 25 here, they will join her. And this, of course, includes people like Prince William.
Yeah. Yeah, she was in the carriage with Prince Charles. Is there anything, any significance in that?
Yes, there's a certain significance to this. Originally, they were going to have her in the carriage on her own. They felt that she could carry off the occasion, and who could doubt it? But then there was a thought a couple of months ago that maybe it would be nicer if there were any problems at all, that she would have somebody to turn to next door to her. And of course, who better a choice than the Prince of Wales? Yeah. And they did want somebody with, they wanted an escort with her. Of course, she hasn't had a proper escort, not really, since the death of the King in 1952. And on these sort of occasions, she tends to have Prince Charles with her. The two really love one another. They are very close, more than the normal grandmother-grandson relationship.
Yeah. So there's a birthday lunch. Now, how formal is that going to be, James?
Not particularly formal, but I have to say that when you're dealing with the House of Windsor and you've got the Queen at the head of the table, there's always an element of being formal. I don't think elbows on the table and eating peas off the fork would go down too well, and I don't think any of them will be in shorts. I think, it's formal, but it will be ties on, and it will be very proper. They're having a lunch in the ballroom here. It's a lunch for about 26 people. Of course, this is unusual. This lunch is normally al fresco in the gardens of Clarence House. Yeah. But this time it will be in the ballroom. I think they were a bit worried about what the weather might be like, and they didn't want to get caught when it was pouring with rain.
Right. The Queen Mother once said, "I love life, and the secret of contentment is knowing how to enjoy what you have." I should imagine she's enjoying every minute of the day.
She loves it. She is like the most perfect of actresses. Put her on stage, and there isn't a better stage anywhere in the world than the one I'm looking at right now at Buckingham Palace, and she will perform like a complete pro. She rises to it. She may be a bit tired, she may be 100, but the adoration that everybody here is giving her has lifted her enormously, and she is beaming and smiling, and Prince Charles is with her, and they're happy, and she's going to see the people she loves dearest in the world, which is her immediate family. So yes, she is absolutely thriving.
That was wet somewhere, somehow. Now, the tragic murder of schoolgirl Sarah Payne shocked the nation last year, and it led to the News of the World campaign of naming and shaming child sex offenders. However, the NSPCC, NACRO, senior police and probation officers all claimed that the paper's action was counterproductive. So I asked the former head of the flying squad at New Scotland Yard, John O'Connor, whether he thought that it was right for the name of convicted paedophiles to be published.
Yes, I think it is, Jim, because the paper aren't being irresponsible. They're being very selective in the people that they actually out in this way. I mean, they've actually discovered there are something like 110,000 people with child sex convictions in this country. There's no question of outing all of these people. They're picking on the ones that they perceive to be the serial offenders who actually act in a predatory way against children. So I think there is a lot of support for what they're doing, and I certainly do support it.
What are the accusations, and I mentioned it just now, that naming and shaming drives these offenders underground, it drives them away from supervision, and therefore it does more harm than good?
Well, I think, to be fair, a lot of these people aren't under supervision, and we certainly know historically from the likes of Sidney Cook and that whole team who were convicted of murdering a couple of kids a few years ago, we certainly know that they weren't under any supervision, and the most dangerous of these predators are underground anyway. So I think what they're trying to do is to heighten the awareness of parents about the dangers of letting their kids play out on their own, because there are these people about, and they're in every area. And if they achieve that, then they've achieved something positive.
Well, the News of the World argued that, worried parents had a right to know if a potential threat to their children's safety existed near to their home. So I asked Tony Butler, he's the Chief Constable of Gloucestershire, also spokesman for the Association of Chief Police Officers on Child Protection, whether he thought that many parents would agree with the News of the World.
Well, there are potential threats all over the place for children, and just knowing that a sex offender lives in a particular neighbourhood, I don't think it's going to be very helpful. If, for example, parents are concerned about a man hanging around outside the school, they should report that fact to the teachers or to the police, whether they know he's a sex offender or not. And I think that's a sensible approach to take. What we're concerned about here is that we're looking to ensure that the public have a proper knowledge and understanding of the risks that children have, rather than some sort of short-sighted notion that simply by naming a few sex offenders, somehow you're going to protect children, which isn't going to be the case.
But you see, the Sex Offenders Register provides for, a limited system of notification whereby certain people, like, for instance, head teachers, doctors, youth leaders, and so on, are told confidentially that about the existence of a local convicted sex offender. I mean, could one not argue that, in principle, if it's right for certain selected people to be informed, it's right for everybody to be informed?
Well, I think you've raised a good point there, Jimmy, because what we're talking about here, and what isn't in the News of the World, is the fact that notification should be part of an overall supervision and monitoring plan. And in a supervision and monitoring plan, it may be necessary to tell a head teacher, for example, or a doctor, but it's got to be part of the plan. Simply notifying people is not a plan, it's simply just telling people. Now, that what the Sex Offender Register has done, it's encouraged the development across the country by the Police and Probation Service of some very sophisticated risk assessment processes, monitoring processes, and so on. And that's what's protecting children, not simply the notification of where an offender lives.
How effective is the present register anyway? The reason I ask is because some people argue that it's easy for paedophiles to evade it. I mean, some of them move home, some of them change their identity, and of course some of them actually committed their offences before the Act was introduced.
Yes.
Anyway.
Yes, that's true. But when it comes back to the original point, what we've got to do is alert parents, particularly, and the general public in totality, about the activities of sex offenders. I mean, let's look at this let's see what the facts are. The facts are that 80% of assaults perpetrated on children are committed by people they know.
Yeah.
So, this notion that there's perverts hiding behind every bush in the park is frankly, well off beam. We know that offenders take a long time, in many cases, to gain relationships with children before they offend. Now, that gives parents an awful lot of opportunities to protect their children, intervene and disrupt this activity. It's the alertness of the public, them working with the police, them knowing their communities. That's what's going to protect children, not simply having a few pictures in a newspaper every weekend.
Well, now, it is true that there have been some unfortunate cases where newspapers have revealed the names of child sex offenders, and it's led to innocent people being the victims of vigilante attacks. The News of the World, for its part, argues that it says its campaign is not about vigilantes, it is about vigilance. What do you say to that?
Well, I recognise they make that point in the paper, but the fact is that newspapers have been responsible for misidentifying, for example, people that have then been attacked and they were innocent. We've got examples documented where, despite pleas from the police and probation, a newspaper's gone ahead and published the name of a person in a particular locality, and his photograph, and that person went missing and disrupted his whole treatment programme. So we're not guessing at this. We know it's happened, and indeed my colleagues in the probation service took a whole dossier of this information to the Press Complaints Commission 2 years ago and sought some help from them. So we're not making this up. This happens. These people are difficult enough to deal with as it is, without monitoring plans being disrupted by vigilante action, which may or may not take place.
That was the Small Faces and their Lazy Sunday. Now, a new expert joined the programme last year, and there were lots of laughs as Beryl Tate, that is, provided answers to cooking problems. In fact, a question from a listener about saucy bodies prompted a saucy answer from Beryl.
Now, Jim, you're going to get this. The body of the sauce
is
exactly...
Steady on.
Is not...
Beryl just threw her body at me.
No, I'm saying the body of the sauce...
Quite frightening.
Is thin. I know, exactly. It's thin. With the corn flour, it's thin. Yeah. It's not... Whereas you've got a roux sauce, it's like me, it's got plenty of body.
You wobbled them again.
Exactly. It's got plenty of body.
Chris Marks, then, from Bude in Cornwall. I like fresh pineapple. I tried large ones, small ones, cheap ones, expensive ones, but the flavour can often be rather sharp when compared with tin pineapple, which is always sweeter. Why is that, says Chris? It's because of the sugary liquid, isn't it?
Yeah, that's right.
I just answered it.
Yeah, tin pineapple is... Tin pineapple is sweet, it's cooked. Fresh pineapple, how do you choose a fresh pineapple?
I don't know.
Right, I'm telling you. Right. Fresh pineapple, when you're choosing it for sweetness, look at the pineapple, don't touch it. Just look at the range of pineapples that are on offer.
Right.
What you're looking for is something that is yellow to orange, anything dark orange or brown, don't touch it. Look at the crown, which is where the leaves are.
Yeah.
Everybody knows this trick. You have to pull the leaves out and it comes out. If the leaves come out easily, you know it's ripe. That's one thing.
What's the greengrocer saying while you're doing all this?
You just tell him that you know a bit about pineapples. Then turn it over. Look at the end. You know where the way it grows?
Yes,
the
core,
the other end. Look to see that that's not mouldy or any discoloured in any way, because that is the central core that goes right to where the crown is. Then smell it. What you're smelling... Pick 2 or 3 up and smell them. You're smelling for a pineapple flavour. You know, that fruity smell. So smell 2 or 3. Then you're going to weigh it. You borrow his scales and say, excuse me, can I weigh...
And then you say, I don't want this.
You weigh 2 or 3 pineapples and you're looking for the heaviest. Why are you looking for the heaviest? Because the heaviest is the juiciest is the sweetest.
Yes.
All right?
Yes.
Now, you're an expert on pineapple now.
I am indeed. Terry just phoned us from Hampshire. He said he's having trouble with his food processor. Right. She won't do what she's told.
Oh.
Joyce Bright from Staines. My local baker has recently closed, and since my children love fresh bread, I thought, I know what I'll do. I'll bake my own. However, the bread-making flour is much more expensive than ordinary flour. Do you think I could get away with using cheaper, plain flour?
Not if you want good results.
No.
In strong flour, there's more gluten than in weak flour. And it's like this here.
What was that?
Knicker elastic.
Oh,
all
yes.
right. So this has plenty of strong flour. It's got plenty of body. All right. It's strong.
You're doing it again.
Exactly. It's stretchy. It holds everything up. All right. Strong flour. Whereas weak flour, that's got little gluten. It's hardly any. Now listen to this.
You
can't hear it.
No.
It's like socks.
That's not knicker elastic at all.
No, they're shearing elastic.
They fall down.
Exactly, it falls down. So it's just for cakes and pastries. So when you're thinking about strong flour, you think it's got plenty of gluten in.
Think knicker elastic.
Think knicker elastic. And it really holds everything up. You know, bread, puff pastry, choux pastry. So that's why it's more expensive. It comes from Canada.
Lots of laughs and good advice from Beryl. Now, last year, I asked some of the leading figures of our time to look back at the last century and forward into this one. And my first Millennium interview was with the Right Honourable Tony Benn, who was elected to the House of Commons more than 50 years ago. Former Labour Minister, of course, now MP for Chesterfield. And he spoke to me about what he saw as the significant events of the 20th century.
Well, in the 20th century, the human race was re-equipped with a completely new set of tools. My mum was born in 1897, alas, she's dead now. But when she was born, the fastest vehicle was a train, 60 mile an hour. Now you can go at 25,000 miles an hour in a spaceship. Right. When she was born, the largest number of people you could speak to was by shouting. Now you could speak to the population of the world. When she was born, the largest number of people you could kill was until the belt of ammunition in a Lewis machine gun ran out. And the largest number of calculations, now you can kill millions, the largest number of calculations you could make was with an abacus, beads on it. And now you can make billions in a microsecond. And what that has done is to create an enormous amount of power in the world. And the question is who controls it. Right. And I just heard a little bit of your talk a moment ago about the merger. We are being dominated increasingly by multinational monopolies.
Which is what the listeners are saying, of course.
Who are what?
Which is what the listeners are saying, of course.
Yes, and we don't control them. And we had all this great struggle to get the vote, the Chartists or the suffragettes, but now the vote has been completely sidetracked, as we saw in Seattle. And when people in Seattle, church people, environmentalists, went along and protest, it gave them a bit of a shock. I thought it was the best news at the last century. If I was asked to pick a single incident, now you ask me, I think I'd say Seattle, when an awful lot of people, thousands of totally non-violent demonstrators, said we're not going to be run by the big companies, we don't control them, by banks and so on.
It's often said that as a nation we're better off than we've ever been before, but fewer people go to church. Some people say, we're living in a spiritual vacuum. Is that true, do you think?
I'm not sure about that. I think younger people, although they may not express it in the old way of being regular churchgoers, are very, very concerned. I've got 9, 10 grandchildren. And they're really concerned about the environment, they're concerned about the future of humanity and so on and so on. But they express it in a different way. The trouble is, many people have been demoralized by the idea that all power is so strong and so remote, it's hardly worth trying. And when Mrs. Thatcher said there's no alternative, which is a very powerful statement to make, it made people think, well, even if we try, we're not going to succeed. Why bother to try?
Well, we're now 11 days into the new century. What do you think is the single most important issue facing Britain? What is the one issue which you think could most change Britain as we know and have known it?
Well, it sounds very basic, but I think it is really about whether you build your society around profit or people. You see a lot of homeless people in the streets, in the doorways and so on. And they're not, nobody takes any notice of them officially because they haven't any money to get a house. They're not customers. And the word customer dehumanizes people. Unless you're rich and can afford something, nobody takes any notice. And yet, we've got unemployed building workers and homeless people. Why don't we use the unemployed building workers to build a house? Because it isn't profitable. And during the war, you see, this is again a memory of 45, people said, if you can plan for war, you can plan for peace. Yep. If you can have full employment to kill Germans, why can't you have full employment to recruit nurses, recruit teachers, look after old people, clean up the environment? Because it isn't profitable. And so, as I get older, I must admit, if I'm allowed to on your programme, I'm getting more of a socialist, a Democrat mainly, and a socialist using the vote to try and improve conditions for people. It's a very simple argument, but I think a lot of people are beginning to wonder whether there isn't a case for that,
Return to sender. That's Elvis, Return to Sender. Now, the flooding in many parts of Britain, which went right on into the winter, brought misery to a lot of people, and questions were asked about what can be done to reduce the devastating effects and, if possible, stop it happening in future. The head of the Flood Hazard Research Centre at Middlesex University is Professor Edmund Penning-Rosal, and he spoke to me about the forecast for our weather patterns in the future.
The forecast is that if you do get global warming-induced flooding, it's going to be the kind of flooding we saw this last week. It's going to be rainstorm-induced flooding. More storms, particularly in the winter and in the autumn period, produced by a warmer sea, which generates more atmospheric moisture. And when you get floods, it comes down from the sky in buckets, doesn't it?
Yeah, quite. So is this going to mean a change then, or perhaps a completely different approach in sort of protecting ourselves from the risk of flooding?
No, I don't think it's a major change. I think what we're going to see is a steady increase in attention to this area on behalf of government. There's been some research that we and others have done which shows that we're not spending enough currently on flood defence. And I think government is sitting up and thinking about this and saying, well, We need to plan over a period of time, probably 20, 30, 50 years, to increase our attention in this area so that when these floods come in the future, we are more prepared for them and we have the flood defences ready, as it were.
It's sometimes pointed out that the Environment Agency, OK, they're building new defences and so on, but much of the work and much of the budget is taken up replacing old and, ineffective structures. I mean, would it be better to get rid of those and, build all new stuff?
No, definitely not. I mean, the things that we're talking about is embankments, flood walls, sluices, gates, the kind of everyday things that people will see when they walk up and down rivers. Those are essential to keep the water in the river, basically, and we have to keep them well maintained. And there's some evidence that they haven't always been well maintained in the past, and that means we get overflows and bursting banks, as you say, so that we get problems which we don't really ought to have.
What about this I was going to say claim, it's more than just a claim, that houses are being built sort of where they oughtn't to be built, really, on floodplains?
Well, that's absolutely right. I mean, we've done research over 10 years on this, and we keep on banging away about this and saying, look, this is a real problem. But local authorities do tend to want development in their area. There's a lot of pressure on land, a lot of pressure for new development, and people say, well, there's that bit of land down there by the river. I don't think it's flooded for 20 years. Why can't we develop that? Of course, it may not have flooded for 20 years, but when the big floods come, it's a wash.
Yeah.
And people forget. It's not negligence. It's not deviance. It's basically people forget.
So are we saying that, or are you saying that you could build there, providing you took the proper precautions before you build?
Absolutely. You can either protect it or you can raise the land carefully, but of course that means it may flood worse somewhere else. You can, with care, develop these floodplain areas. They are valuable areas to develop, but you have to think what might happen if the major floods come, and that's what people haven't been doing enough of in the past. They haven't thought ahead strategically, and I think that's what more attention is being given to that by the Environment Agency now. Now that we have a national body really acting nationally, I think we can see benefits there. It won't show through immediately. It takes time.
And who is going to pay for, the extra cost of this?
Well, you and me, Jim.
Yeah, well, that's that then.
No, I mean, there is a system of levies on county councils. County councils collect the money from you and me, and they pay it to the Environment Agency for flood defence. And currently we spend about £200 million a year on flood defence in this country. And the evidence is that that's not enough. It's going to have to go up.
That's Candice Satin, Young Hearts Run Free, and that's all there is in our first programme of 2001. Forward again, of course, as from 12 o'clock tomorrow, so make a point of being with us then. Till then, take care of yourselves. Wish you a happy new year all over again. JY saying bye for now. It'll be Richard Allenson after the news on 88 to 91 FM, Radio 2 from the BBC.
It's 2 o'clock. This is John Marsh.